Affidavit for probable cause. The undersigned swears and affirms, under the penalties for perjury, that he has good cause to believe that, on or about the 21st day of December 2025 in the county of Allen and in the state of Indiana, said defendant did knowingly commit the crimes of murder and attempted murder. The defendant, Xzavier Sanders, is described as a male/black, DOB, April 3, 1997. The affiant, Scott Wilson 1757F, is a detective of the Fort Wayne Police Department and believes and has good cause to believe that the defendant committed the aforesaid offenses based on the following. On December 21, Andraias Curry and his fiancée, witness 1, were at a small Christmas party in New Haven, Indiana. Attended by fellow church members and close friends, around 10 in attendance. Andraias and witness 1 left the Christmas party and arrived at Hawkins' House of Fish located at Redacted at approximately 3:07 a.m., according to surveillance video from Hawkins. Witness 1 fell asleep during the drive from the Christmas party to Hawkins and remained asleep until just after the shooting. Andraias paid for his food order around 3:33 a.m. Andraias got his food order and left Hawkins at approximately 4:23 a.m. Andraias got into his 2015 gray Nissan Murano and proceeded towards his residence. Upon arriving at the intersection of Fairfield Avenue and Paulding Road, a silver Buick Enclave pulled along the driver's side of Andraias' Nissan Murano and fired 8 rounds into the driver's side of the Murano. 2 of the gunshots struck Andraias and ultimately ended his life. Witness 1 was sitting in the front passenger seat of the Murano at the time of the shooting and some of the bullets ripped through her jacket, although she did survive. Video was located from the Shell gas station located at Redacted and law enforcement identified the shooting vehicle as a silver Buick Enclave. Video footage which showed Andraias' vehicle, Murano, heading southbound on Fairfield Avenue pulling up to the light at Paulding Road. The Buick Enclave was behind Andraias and as Andraias pulled up to the light, the Buick Enclave pulled along the driver's side of Andraias' vehicle. There were 8 gunshots fired from the Buick Enclave into Andraias' vehicle and then the Buick Enclave pulled away going eastbound on Paulding Road. Law enforcement records revealed Andraias was a suspect in a shooting in November of 2024. In that shooting, Damiah Jackson-Sanders, who is the sister to Xzavier Sanders, was the victim. Detective Norton advised your affiant that he was very familiar with Xzavier and had recently seen a silver Buick Enclave parked behind a house he's been known to stay at off Buchanan Street, with his girlfriend Witness 2. The Buick Enclave was registered to Witness 2. While patrolling the area of Buchanan Street, on December 25, 2025, your affiant came across a silver Buick Enclave backed into a parking space in Chapel Oaks in front of Redacted with an Indiana temporary plate displaying T7131101 and registered to Witness 2. Your affiant traced the plate back to Silverline Automotive located at Redacted. Your affiant could see into the windows of the parked Buick and in plain view laying on the back seat was a shell casing. A warrant was obtained for Silverline Automotive to seize all documents associated with the sale of the Buick Enclave as well as any video evidence that may have captured the transaction for the vehicle. Your affiant interviewed an employee who remembered the transaction conducted on the Buick. The employee was also able to pick Xzavier Sanders out of a photo array as being the person who facilitated the transaction for the Buick Enclave. Xzavier asked that the Buick be put in Witness 2's name. A DVR containing surveillance video from Bob Hawkins' House of Fish was obtained via a search warrant since this was the last known location that Witness 1 and Andraias were at prior to the shooting. Fort Wayne Police Department's Digital Forensic Laboratory extracted video evidence from the Hawkins DVR. Your affiant observed the following. On December 21, 2025, Xzavier arrives to Hawkins at 2:30 a.m. and parks his black Land Rover on the west side of Hawkins on Weiser Park Avenue. Damiah and her cousin Witness 4, DOB Redacted, were in the Land Rover with Xzavier and the 3 of them walk into Hawkins at 2:34 a.m. Xzavier walks back out of Hawkins at 2:39 a.m., with the keys to the Land Rover attached to a blue lanyard in his hand. Xzavier proceeds to get into the back seat on the driver's side for an unknown reason. Xzavier gets out of the Land Rover at 2:42 a.m., and goes around to the back of Hawkins and enters back inside Hawkins through a back door. Xzavier, Damiah and Witness 4 were all in the kitchen and entered back into the bar area, no alcohol served, through the kitchen doors. Andraias arrives to Hawkins at 3:07 a.m., and parks his Nissan Murano on Weiser Park Avenue just south of Pontiac Street. Andraias leaves his fiancée Witness 1, sleeping in the car while he went inside to order food. Andraias walks back out of Hawkins at 3:18 a.m. to start the vehicle back up, due to cold weather and his fiancée asleep inside the vehicle. Damiah and Witness 4 appear to make Xzavier aware that Andraias walked out the door. Xzavier then goes and stands in the threshold of the door watching Andraias, 3:19 a.m. Damiah and Witness 4 come out front door, 3:20 a.m., and stand with Xzavier while watching Andraias. Xzavier, Damiah and Witness 4 go back into Hawkins at 3:24 a.m. Xzavier starts patting people down as they enter Hawkins. While standing just inside the entrance, Xzavier is seen letting 2 individuals walk right by him but makes it a point to stop and pat down Andraias, 3:24 a.m. Once Andraias gets patted down by Xzavier, Xzavier follows Andraias to the back by the end of the bar next to the men's bathroom. Xzavier walks up to Andraias and says something to him while grabbing his arm and directing him towards the men's bathroom. Damiah grabs the Land Rover keys from around Xzavier's neck and Xzavier goes into the bathroom with Andraias at 3:24 a.m. Xzavier's friend sees that Xzavier took Andraias into the bathroom and so he went into the restroom too. Damiah and Witness 4 go out to the Land Rover and Witness 4 grabs something from the front passenger seat at 3:26 a.m., and then they go behind Hawkins. They entered back into Hawkins through a back door and enter back into the bar area at 3:26 a.m., and then Damiah goes into the bathroom at 3:27 a.m., where now it's Andraias, Damiah, Xzavier and Xzavier's unknown friend in the bathroom. Damiah comes out of the bathroom at 3:28 a.m., followed by Xzavier, Andraias and Xzavier's friend. Xzavier, Damiah and Witness 4 then go back into a section of the restaurant/bar where it can't be seen by cameras. They remain back there until all three come out at 3:33 a.m. Witness 4 and Damiah go back out to the Land Rover. Damiah has the Land Rover keys in her hand, and grab Xzavier's coat and hand it off to him while he was right behind them. Damiah and Witness 4 leave in the Land Rover at 3:34 a.m., and while sitting at the stop sign at Weiser Park Avenue and East Pontiac Street, Xzavier walks up to them, and they have a conversation through the driver's window until Damiah turns west onto Pontiac Street. Witness 4 and Damiah return at 3:40 a.m., and park the Land Rover back on Weiser Park at 3:40 a.m. When Damiah and Witness 4 enter back into Hawkins at 3:41 a.m. Witness 4 goes right to where Xzavier was, inside that room where cameras can't view. Damiah puts the Land Rover keys into her front right coat pocket. Xzavier then leaves Hawkins at 3:42 a.m., and stands out front, in view of Andraias' vehicle. Xzavier goes back inside Hawkins at 3:45 a.m., and has a conversation with Damiah and Witness 4. While speaking with Xzavier, Damiah is pointing towards the rear of Hawkins as though their conversation may involve something back there. Xzavier also points towards the back of Hawkins and then Damiah, Witness 4 and Xzavier all leave Hawkins at 3:46 a.m. Damiah gets into the driver's seat of the Land Rover and Witness 4 gets into the front passenger seat. Xzavier, who is a little behind them, goes up to the driver's side window and speaks with them. Damiah and Witness 4 leave in the Land Rover at 3:48 a.m. Xzavier goes behind Hawkins for a quick second and then comes back out and heads back to the front of Hawkins at 3:48 a.m. Andraias comes out of Hawkins at 3:48 a.m. and stands out front looking towards his vehicle. Xzavier walks by Andraias and then stands on the steps to the entrance directly behind Andraias. Andraias turns to enter Hawkins but must wait for Xzavier to get off the step and then Xzavier follows Andraias into Hawkins. While reviewing the cameras that face northbound on Weiser Park Avenue, at 3:54 and 22 seconds a.m., there are a set of headlights that arrive reflecting off the houses and parked vehicles along the street from behind Hawkins. Then a second set of headlights appear at 3:54 and 54 seconds a.m., also reflecting off the houses and vehicles parked along Weiser Park from behind Hawkins. Damiah and Witness 4 come walking from this area where the headlights were at 3:55 and 58 seconds a.m. It's believed that Damiah and Witness 4 left in the Land Rover but returned with Damiah driving the Land Rover and Witness 4 driving the Buick, parking them both behind Hawkins. Damiah and Witness 4 enter back into Hawkins at 3:56 a.m., and Damiah had the Land Rover keys in her left hand. Witness 4 enters Hawkins and immediately goes to the right back into the room where cameras can't see into, and eventually Damiah goes into the same area. This is where Xzavier has been hanging out. Xzavier exits Hawkins at 4 a.m., and while walking to go around the back of Hawkins, he's looking over at Andraias' vehicle. At 4:01 a.m., Xzavier goes behind Hawkins where the headlights were shining from the two vehicles Damiah and Witness 4 parked. The Buick Enclave then comes southbound out of the alley and crosses over Pontiac Street, at 4:02 a.m. Xzavier's sister Witness 5, who had been at Hawkins all night with two of her female friends, had her Ford Fusion parked where Xzavier parked the Buick. Heaven had left at 3:56 a.m., and returned to Hawkins at 4:04 a.m., parking on Weiser Park Avenue. Xzavier is able to see that his sister Witness 5 was back and he pulls out onto Pontiac Street, and turns northbound on Weiser Park and pulls alongside her Ford Fusion and engages in a conversation with them for 21 seconds. Damiah and Witness 4 came out of Hawkins and walked to the rear of Hawkins at this time as well. There are headlights that flash, consistent with a fob unlocking doors, as Damiah and Witness 4 walk behind Hawkins. Xzavier leaves Witness 5's vehicle at 4:06 and 1 second a.m., and then drives over the curb and sidewalk and drives behind Hawkins where Damiah and Witness 4 are in the Land Rover trying to get it turned around, based on the lights in view of the camera. The Buick goes out of camera view at 4:06 and 18 seconds a.m., and is picked back up on another camera coming southbound through the alley at 4:06 and 31 seconds a.m. The Buick crosses over Pontiac Street, back into its original spot to continue to maintain surveillance of the front door for our victim Andraias to exit. The Land Rover is also seen exiting the alley at 4:06 and 55 seconds a.m., 24 seconds after the Buick, and leaves the area westbound on East Pontiac Street. While Xzavier is in the Buick watching the entry/exit for Hawkins, at 4:11 a.m., a vehicle parks on East Pontiac Street, in a way to obstruct Xzavier's view of the entry/exit door. Xzavier pulls the Buick around the backside of a childcare building and blacks out. Xzavier has now put himself in a position to see the entry/exit doors as well as Andraias' vehicle, which is still running with his fiancée still asleep in it. Andraias comes out of Hawkins with his bag of food at 4:23 a.m., and gets into the driver's seat and proceeds southbound on Weiser Park Avenue at 4:24 a.m. Xzavier waits a few seconds and then drives through the grass, across the sidewalk and over the curb and turns southbound on Weiser Park Avenue and accelerates at a high rate of speed to catch up with Andraias. Andraias turns west on McKee Street, and Xzavier follows. Andraias proceeds to turn southbound on Hannah Street, with Xzavier following in the Buick. Andraias passes in front of the Marathon gas station at Hannah and Oxford at 4:25 and 22 seconds a.m., and Xzavier passed by the same location at 4:25 and 35 seconds a.m. Andraias turns westbound onto Rudisill Boulevard and Xzavier turns westbound on Gumper Avenue and then southbound on Monroe Street. To westbound Rudisill Boulevard, Xzavier cut the block to possibly keep Andraias from thinking he's being followed. Andraias goes through Rudisill and Lafayette westbound at 4:26 and 18 seconds a.m., and Xzavier went through the same intersection still following at 4:26 and 31 seconds a.m. Andraias turns southbound on Fairfield Avenue with Xzavier still following in the Buick and pass in front of cameras near Fairfield Avenue and Maxine Drive. Andraias goes by at 4:27 and 44 seconds a.m., and Xzavier goes by at 4:27 and 47 seconds a.m. They continue southbound on Fairfield Avenue, with Andraias coming to a stop at the light on Fairfield at Paulding Road. Xzavier pulls along the driver's side of Andraias' vehicle and fired 8 rounds into Andraias' driver's side door, striking Andraias with 2 shots and leading to his death. Additionally, Witness 1 had projectiles from these fired shots ripped through her jacket while sitting in the front passenger seat asleep. Your affiant interviewed a witness who was present with Damiah at Bob Hawkins' House of Fish. The witness advised she was asked by Damiah to go with her to get to the other car because Xzavier didn't want to go to the after-hours club. I asked what the other vehicle was and the witness advised it was a silver truck/SUV and they picked it up from Xzavier's house. I asked who drove the vehicle back to Hawkins and the witness advised that Damiah asked her to drive it back. I asked where she parked the vehicle and she advised Damiah told her to park in the grass which is directly behind Hawkins and consistent with video evidence. I asked the witness what she did with the keys to the vehicle and she advised she either gave them directly to Xzavier or she gave to Damiah to give to Xzavier. I asked the witness if she knew who Andraias Curry was prior to this night/morning and she advised she didn't know who he was until Damiah pointed him out inside of Hawkins saying that it was the guy who shot her back in 2024. The witness advised once Andraias arrived at Hawkins, Xzavier and Damiah were whispering a lot with each other. The witness advised if she would get close to them while they were whispering, they would stop talking. The witness advised she thought this was a little odd but didn't think much of it at the time. The witness advised she saw Xzavier in the Buick speaking with Heaven when they were walking out to the Land Rover that was parked around the back of Hawkins. Your affiant had the opportunity to interview Xzavier in the early stages of this investigation. Xzavier denied knowing anything about the Buick Enclave. Even when shown a picture of the Buick, Xzavier still denied ever seeing it or knowing anything about it. Xzavier advised he has never seen Andraias and wouldn't know him if he was standing next to him. Xzavier advised he's never seen the guy until the news release. While speaking with Xzavier's sister, Damiah Jackson-Sanders, she advised that Xzavier was the one getting into the Buick the morning of the shooting. Your affiant believes the planning and execution of these crimes were motivated by Xzavier and Damiah's desire to exact revenge on the victim from his accidental shooting of Damiah in 2024. I affirm, under the penalties for perjury, that the foregoing representations are true. Date February 11, 2026. Affidavit for probable cause. The undersigned swears and affirms, under the penalties for perjury, that he has good cause to believe that, on or about the 21st day of December 2025 in the county of Allen and in the state of Indiana said defendant did knowingly commit the crimes of conspiracy to commit murder and assisting a criminal. The defendant, Damiah Jackson-Sanders, is described as a female/black, DOB, October 3, 2002. The affiant, Scott Wilson 1757F, is a detective of the Fort Wayne Police Department. The affiant believes and has good cause to believe that the defendant committed the aforesaid offenses. The affiant bases his belief on the fact that on or about the 21 day of December 2025 in Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, the said defendant did knowingly and intentionally conspire with her brother, Xzavier Sanders, DOB redacted, to commit the murder of Andraias Curry and did assist him in this act. During this investigation, it has become apparent that Damiah Jackson-Sanders was involved in the homicide of Andraias Curry. Damiah arrived to Hawkins' House of Fish with Xzavier and Witness 4 and was in direct communication with Xzavier the entire evening leading to the homicide. Damiah kept an eye on Andraias and would make Xzavier aware when Andraias would walk out the doors of Hawkins. Damiah, Nacia and Xzavier coordinated with each other throughout the entire evening the events leading up to the homicide. Damiah went into the men's bathroom when she knew Xzavier and his friend were in there confronting Andraias. Damiah assisted in getting the Buick brought to Hawkins so that Xzavier could use it to follow Andraias and shoot him. Further, your affiant believes Damiah has the motive for this offense as her actions in planning this murder appears retaliatory for the shooting incident of her prior. We affirm, under the penalties for perjury, that the foregoing representations are true. Date February 11, 2026.